Today, I'm going to be exploring the tweets of Edward Skeletrix, starting from the tweets where almost everyone knows him from, and going down and breaking down the lore of the tweets almost no one knows. You can also learn a lot about the Edward Skeletrix character from the tweets because they're all a part of his world building. We start with the tip of the iceberg, the tweets that a lot of people know him from, and where people may have become fans from. The first tweet is the Syckli by Edward Skeletrix backpack, and I feel like Syckli is a big part of Edward Skeletrix's character. It really shows that he's not just an artist and not just a musician. He really does encapsulate a ton of different things between fashion designer, music video editor, and just creative director as a whole, along with his main thing at the moment being a musician. The next tweet is Edward's tweet where it says, "You ever killed somebody and they face keep popping up everywhere you go?" This isn't a reference to him actually killing anyone, I believe. I'm not sure if Edward has ever done that, but I don't think he ever has. But I'm assuming this is more a reference to being an artist in the hip hop space. A lot of people pretend like they've killed a bunch of people. I feel like Edward's kind of trying to lean into that, where he tried to make a viral tweet here, and this one did go extremely viral with over 200,000 likes and 20,000 retweets. I feel like he's just kind of playing into this character of a regular hip hop rapper. The next one is his tweet, "I'm a creative director before anything. That's my talent. I don't like making art." And Edward actually brought this up in his ML interview where he said people kind of took this the wrong way, where it's not that he doesn't like making art. He doesn't physically like making art because he wants to be the person that kind of just comes up with the ideas and the other people have to put together it and kind of come up with a way of putting his idea into a real art piece. Edward is an artist, but he just doesn't physically like it. And this tweet actually got a lot of attention because Jane Remover actually replied to it saying this: "Come on." And I do understand her perspective where it seems like Edward is kind of being anti-intellectual and saying, oh, art is an important thing while he is creating art himself. But clearly, Edward wasn't trying to say that he didn't like making art. He just says he doesn't like physically making art, which is very understandable. The next tweet, Edward says, "Accept everyone even if they hate you or are completely against what you stand for. Know that they are only like that because of their life experiences. If you had the same experiences as them, you would be exactly like them." This is very similar to the nature versus nurture debate, where people say if you have the exact same experiences as someone, you're going to be exactly like them, versus it's something innate in you that happens when you're born, which kind of turns you into the person you are. And I do really think Edward is kind of hitting something on the head here. You shouldn't really hate someone for what they're saying, because a lot of the times they're just uneducated and they just don't understand your perspective. And a lot of times you just have to have a healthy conversation with people to actually turn them into the right type of person and to get them to understand your side. I think this is something that honestly happens a lot more often in the social media time frame, where people just dismiss other people's arguments because they have an opinion that's the exact opposite of them. The next tweet is Edward's tweet where he says, "My performance art," showing off the museum music exhibition. This one is pretty interesting to me because it seems like Edward always saw it as some sort of performance, where instead of a concert, this is kind of his way of performing for people. And he did confirm this in the ML interview as well. So I think this does show that Edward has always thought of things on a deeper level and has always thought of himself as not necessarily just a musician that goes out and does concerts, but thinks of him as kind of a fine artist who's putting on something to make people think instead of just to listen to music and have fun. The next tweet is, "I'm trying to creative direct for Justin Bieber, who can put me into contact." It seems like Edward really wanted to work with a huge artist like Justin Bieber. This was during Justin's crash out era, where he was always on the paparazzi and doing all these crazy things for attention, which clearly I think seemed like promotion for his recent album Swag. But it would be really cool to see Edward and Justin Bieber together, but he did explain exactly what he was going to do on the ML interview, where he wanted to take a photo of Justin with a pipe on the ground with an illicit substance in it. Edward's next tweet is, "A children's scribble is just as good as the Mona Lisa. Everyone is just as good as everyone. This is a real true fact." This is true technically because all art is objective and there is no way of valuing art. I think this is probably in response to a lot of people talking about his album Museum Music and calling it ironic, or people just thinking about consumerism as a whole, where there is no value put to art. art is all subjective. Nothing is objective in art. You can like something and someone else might not like it at all, and they could think it's absolutely terrible. And you just have to stick with your opinion, because you shouldn't let someone else affect your liking of art and your connection to it. The next tweet from Edward is, "I love you conditionally," and there really isn't that much lore behind this one, but it does show that Edward kind of loves his fans as long as they love him in return. The next tweet is Edward's tweet announcing the Congratulations music video on YouTube. This one is also pretty boring and there's basically no lore behind it. The next tweet is Edward's, one of his most recent tweets with the peace emoji and this hat he's wearing, and this is the one that a lot of people thought was a retirement post, but it comes out that he was just trying to make it seem like Jackie Chan's post, where Jackie Chan put out a long post saying all these things and then he was just a regular guy just saying thank you to people, and people thought he was dead. The next post is of Skeletrix Language, where it says, "I made this whole album in a car while sleeping in a car," and that shows that Edward was homeless during this time period, which I actually didn't even know until he posted this tweet. And it seems like this is a lot of time when he was going on IG Live and saying a lot of stuff, and it was really the start of his music career. And I am really surprised that he was homeless during this time period, because it did seem like he had Syckli as a brand and it made a lot of money. So I don't know why he was homeless, or if this was just kind of a creative decision where he just wanted to put himself to the brink of like having a really bad life and being homeless and living in a car, or if he just didn't have any money left from Syckli. But this is a really interesting thing that Edward did during this time period, and it does come off as a really cool era of Edward, where he was living in a car and he was making this album, and the fact that it came out to be one of the most unique albums of all time. Meditation is just not reacting to thoughts. You don't have to do anything to meditate, but you can if it helps you. A thought can make you cry, and it can start a war by accident. This is a really interesting tweet to me, because I don't really think meditation is just not reacting to thoughts, but it does do a lot about making you think about the impact of a thought, where it says a thought can make you cry, but it also can start a war by accident. And I think that is really interesting, because wars and a lot of the big things that happen in life are all started just by people thinking about things, people thinking about ways they need to do. And a lot of the greatest wars in society were thought by people because they wanted to have more stuff and they wanted to do more things, or they wanted to get back at someone who had wronged them. So it is really interesting to see how like wars are all shaped by just people's thoughts. The next tweet says, "Museum Music by Edward Skeletrix, out now." And this is simply an announcement of his second studio album, Museum Music, dropping. "I recently noticed I still take life seriously to a degree, and that's the only reason for my suffering. Trying to control this chaotic life is so hard not to do, and it's the worst thing you can do." This is a really interesting tweet to me, because it's all based on Edward's role model, Eckhart Tolle's theory of thought, where you kind of just have to let everyone else do whatever they want to do, and you can only control what happens to you in the present right now. You can't control anything that happened to you in the past. You can't control anything that happens in the future. You can only control what happens to you in the exact moment. I think it is a really interesting thing to think about, because there is nothing you can do except make your present as good as possible and make it the best possible life you can live. And I think Edward kind of lays out a really interesting thing to think about here, where you're just going to have to let other people do whatever they want. And if you try to control your chaotic life, you're going to do too much, and you're going to ruin all the things that you wanted to happen, instead of just allowing it to happen to you and making the best out of that situation. The more you try to separate yourself, whether it's by skin color, gender, sexual orientation, interests, social status, the more you will suffer. I think this is another great point that Edward makes here, where I think a lot of people try and self-separate themselves into too many different categories, where they actually turn into something where you're just in an echo chamber of someone who's exactly like you and won't kind of push everything that you need to be pushed. Where if some people are just complacent with their life, they can be complacent with your life, but you're never going to make anything great by being complacent. You need to get out there and have people that will push you and challenge you on things, because then you'll become a stronger person. And trying to self-separate into too many different things turns you into someone that you're really not, because you kind of get forced into a lane where you just have to stay the same for the rest of your life, because you're with these people that have the exact same interests as you, instead of having something where you can start changing and you can start going through life. And I think Edward also makes a great point here, because everyone is human. That's the thing that all connects us, instead of all these different little social statuses or things that you try to divide yourself into these different groups, because we're all human first and foremost, and that should be the thing that connects connects all of us. Business is the most interesting art form. This is something that Edward went into length about in the interview, but it kind of all boils down to the fact that when you're making art, you are just running a business yourself. And the fact is, a lot of the things that get seen as things that only artists do, like world building, all that, are just branding. If you read the Virgil Abloh book about how to build a brand, he kind of just breaks down all the things that an artist does, and building a brand and building a business and being an artist, they're all kind of these really similar things, and Edward kind of really hits it on the head here. Business is one of the most interesting art forms, if you can take it like that, because you are doing all these different things that would be seen as art if you're a musician or a movie star, but they're not seen as an art form because you're running a business. I definitely don't want to be seen as a good person. Everybody has their own definition of what good or bad is. I don't think anyone knows what good or bad it truly is. Don't look at me as a role model, you don't know me. Live your own life. I think this is a good point that Edward makes here that mainly reflects the stan culture that I feel like has really built up in kind of this hip hop space, but just in general with music, where a lot of the labels and the people running music businesses are all trying to get these super fans and people that kind of idolize their favorite musicians as artists and have these parasocial relationships with them. And you have to realize that a lot of these people aren't exactly the way you're going to see them as, where online they can kind of present an idealized version of them where they're just the best possible person and they don't do anything that's good or bad. And I think people always think they have their own definition of good or bad, but good or bad isn't really an objective thing. It's all subjective based on what you think is good or what you think is bad. And I think Edward presents a real compelling argument that good and bad just are words. They don't mean anything. There is no person that is going to judge you and say, oh, you're a good person or you're a bad person. Yes, someone may say you're a bad person, but to millions or billions of other people, you could be a great person. I hate sex, it's disgusting to me. Edward said in the ML interview that sometimes he gets done and he just thinks it's disgusting. And I agree to a point, because this is something that's done for making babies, and there's always going to be a lot of things that are disgusting about having sex. This hoe did witchcraft on me. Edward said this was about a girl in 2020 who he thought did witchcraft on him because she had him in such a crazy trance at a point. Life is a crazy joke. Edward also referenced life being a joke in his song Life's So Funny, and it seems like Edward has kind of had this idea for a long time based on the fact that this happened in March 2023, and he referenced it in his 2025 album Museum Music. We now move into the above the water section, the tweets that the majority of fans should know if they're a big fan of Edward. Please, has anyone seen my friend? We have been desperately searching for him. He was last seen in Brooklyn, New York. If you have any information, please text me. Bro, can you please respond to the people texting you at least? Been missing for hell long. People are worried and you posting on IG like it's nothing. This is also a really interesting set of tweets because Edward said at this time that this guy was not missing and that he was just kind of tweeting out there, trolling, trying to get people to text his number. But he said after this fight with Brennan, this guy actually did go missing. And the last time he saw him was like multiple weeks ago. And the last time he saw him, the guy said he was on the Brooklyn Bridge. So I don't really know what happened after that, but it's kind of crazy because it seemed like this was all a joke for a while and then it actually became something real. I started designing while I was working in the psychiatric ward. This is a really interesting tweet from Edward because it kind of shows why Syckli's designs were so weird and out there and off-putting, because Edward had worked for a while as an assistant in a psychiatric ward, even though he eventually did quit because Syckli became too big to juggle being a psychiatric assistant and having his own brand, so he eventually did quit. But it does seem like this kind of really referenced why he came up with all these off-putting designs and came up with something that just became so uniquely Edward Skeletrix, where there is something that you kind of know and understand. It's a bag, but it also has eyes and it feels like a person, but it's also like a weird person. And it's so interesting when you look at some of Edward's designs because they could really only come from one person's brain, and it shows that he is such a unique artist. This is the cover for SNSSAN, which is one of Edward's singles for Museum Music. I'm not going to say it out loud because it does have the N-word in it, but it's all based on My Name Lil T-Man, where Edward said in the interview with Emwell that he really wanted something to kind of represent the excesses of Galaxy Gas and kind of make a joke out of it, because Lil T-Man is like just such a funny meme in general. And he said it was his favorite meme at the time. And he said he took this photo on a self-camera or a self-timer, and he got into the photo as the self-timer was going off. And I think this is just such an interesting style of photography because it seems so flat, yet it is 3D in a way where it's like you can clearly tell that the subjects are in a 3D lens, but the photograph seems so much more flat than you see like a regular video or just any other photography. Next up, we have the cover for Love You, and I've always seen this as a way of like flashing the world in a way where there is kind of this sexual gratification at the front of the photo with this person flashing their pubes to the camera, but it's not enough to like actually get you turned on. So it's just done in a kind of like weird way where you understand it's sexual, but it's not like sexually arousing, because it's like, who is going to get sexually aroused by pubes? I don't know, definitely not me, but in a way it's still like suggesting something that is sexual. The next photo we have is this photo where Edward is posted up in front of Trump with orange face on and Kamala with black face on, and it says, "It's so much shit that I no longer care about, and it feels good, honestly." I don't really know what this one means at all, but I'm assuming it kind of means that he doesn't care about the election, and it's two kind of sides of the same coin. Politicians are often dressed up in this way where they seem so completely different, and I think honestly Trump this time is different, and he feels a lot different than he was beforehand. But during the election there was this kind of sense of it's not really going to change anything if we elect Kamala or if we elect Trump. There's still going to be two sides of the same coin. They're not really going to do anything. And Trump did come in and change a lot more things than people thought he would. But there was this kind of sense of, yeah, nothing's going to happen. So Edward posting up in front of a tweet that says, "I don't have a lot of shit to care about," makes a lot of sense because he doesn't really care about the election himself. The person who cares the least has the most power in every situation. Edward explained that this means that someone who just doesn't care about a situation, so let's say you just don't care about your girlfriend at all. If you don't care about your girlfriend, you can go and cheat, and that's going to change your situation the most. So that person has the most power over the situation versus the girlfriend who really cares about the boyfriend, and she's all like, "Oh my God, I hope you never do anything to me." And the fact that he doesn't care, he has way more control over this situation because she's in love with him while he doesn't care about her. So it's all about the person that has the least caring in the situation is going to have the most ability to impact the situation versus them really having the most power in the situation. They just have the most ability to impact the situation in a way that kind of benefits them, because if you just don't care about anything, then you can kind of do whatever you want. This video is of the Fun release and kind of announced Fun actually releasing. It also technically has a little teaser in there that says Skeletrix Island Radio dropping August 18th, and clearly that never happened. So this was all kind of just a troll from Edward where he wanted to troll his fans that he was dropping another album, which honestly is one of the stupidest things to me. Why as an artist would you just want to troll your fans that you're dropping another album? Seems extremely stupid to me, but it's something that Edward loves to do because he just loves to play with people's emotions. The next one is the photo that Edward took for the Useria cover, which has a quote tweet of "I love my life." And this one is pretty interesting to me because I really love the like red background with all the shadows coming and then Edward with his face covered, but I don't really know what this one means at all. I mean, it does really fit the vibe of the song where it's all this like lavender town sounding stuff, and it sounds very dark and demonic, I guess, in a way, but Edward's never really gone back to that sound besides that one song, so it does kind of suck. "I am the same as a tree or a table." Edward said in the ML interview that this meant that we're all just human beings and we're all made of cells and we're all the same as a tree or table because they're all made of cells. They're all part of Earth. And I don't really know how much I agree with this because we are someone that has like the ability to do things and impact our environment versus a tree and table can't really do that. Everyone is beautiful in their own way. This is a quote tweet of a Kingsley tweet, who's one of his friends, who says, "Just an average ass dude chasing my dreams," which, I don't know, I just kind of love this tweet because it kind of just shows Edward and kind of this like troll ability that he really loves to do. He and Kingsley love to like play jokes and pranks on people. I feel like this is like a Twitter prank where it's like clearly you have the ugly guy where Kingsley edits his face to make himself look really ugly, and then Edward just says everyone is beautiful in their own way. So it's clearly something there to have some engagement bait, but at the same time it is just a really funny tweet. And if you think about it, everyone is beautiful in their own way. Beauty is subjective, and even though there is a sense of objectivity to it, it's all based on what we've learned over our entire life and our simple monkey brain that wants people that are more healthy and is going to prioritize people that look a specific way because they're better to mate with. To get what you desire, you have to manipulate everything and other people. That's why it's best to try and not desire anything. This is something that kind of reflects the Eckhart Tolle philosophy of you just have to focus on your things at the moment, and you're going to have to manipulate people if you desire to have like all these crazy things, because some people are also going to have those same dreams and only some of the people can reach those dreams. So it is a kind of interesting thing, but I don't really think this is necessarily true because I don't think you always have to manipulate things to get what you desire. I just think if you have a dream that is like this huge thing of like, oh, I'm going to try to become the president, you're going to have to manipulate people and use people in a bad way to become the president, unless you just think in a specific way, because you're going to lie about things, you're going to backstab people because you need to get to this dream. And if you have these super high achieving goals that are going to hurt other people, maybe you shouldn't desire anything. The devil is made up, not real. Edward said in his interview with ML that he doesn't really know if God or the devil are real, but he said he was just doing this tweet to kind of just provoke people and troll them by saying something that kind of got people talking about him. Chaos is normal. Accepting the chaos is the only way you can have order in your life. This is very similar to the tweet Edward made earlier, but this is all about the fact that if you try and control and micromanage every single part of your life, something is eventually going to go awry and wrong, and you're just going to have to realize that life in general is chaotic, and just accepting that life is going to be chaotic makes it so much easier to understand when something goes wrong, the way to actually fix it. This tweet is a tweet of a video of the Beirut explosion. Edward used this in a lot of his different TikTok videos, and this was his very first tweet on X.com. And it's really interesting because this became something that kind of went past Edward's career as a whole, because I've seen so many people that have like posted that video and posted even just the Beirut explosion in the same way as Edward has, and it just seems like this has kind of transcended his career as an artist, as a musician, because this kind of Beirut thing has gone so viral on its own. Skeletrix Island Radio. This is the tweet that announced Edward's technically second album at that period, Skeletrix Island Radio, which eventually did get scrapped as an album, but this was 11 days after the release of Skeletrix Language, and this eventually did become one of Edward's most interesting album cycles, I guess, because it never did come out and it got scrapped in eventually becoming museum music and eventually just becoming kind of this own thing that wasn't really an album in the first place, but just a place for Edward to release music that wasn't the music he wanted to release on his main platform, and kind of become like this radio station of a ton of different types of music coming out. This is just so interesting to me because Edward always announces these albums so far in advance that they eventually have their names changed or something else happen. Like Body of Work got announced a long time before it's actually going to come out, and Museum Music got announced also a lot of time before it came out. So it's just really interesting to see how early Edward announces some of these albums, because a lot of times they come out as something different. Don't try to change the world, just change yourself first. This is a really interesting tweet to me because it seems that Edward thinks that people really can't change the world in general, and it's more important to just focus on yourself, because the world is such a huge task to change that it's going to be so hard to do that you just have to focus on yourself first, and maybe some of those ripples that you changing yourself have will eventually ripple out and change the world. MFs don't give Russia they flowers. They got the best swag out there. Edward explained in the ML interview that this was talking about how Russian people kind of just take up a lot of shit from a lot of other people, saying, oh, it's a Slav with his Adidas tracksuit, and they just kind of keep the same swag they have. He also said the same thing was true about a lot of other Eastern European countries, and said that Eastern European countries are often the people that fuck with him the most because they have this just unique connection to his type of music. I hate how it could just say anything right now and you would believe it. And this to me is a reference to a lot of other Edward's work where he just says things that are complete lies and they turn out to be believed and seen as a narrative because he just says them out loud. And it also shows the fact that people just take everything on social media as the truth, even when a lot of times it's slanted in a specific direction, it has a certain bias, or it could just be an outright lie. Emotions really fake, ASF, WTF. This to me just shows that Edward thinks emotions are fake. They're all something and they're all a chemical reaction to your body. And if you just don't think about them, if you just don't have any emotions, you can really kind of control your entire body and how your body reacts to things and how your body has an emotional response. Art is the main reason for my suffering. Earlier in the video, I said that Edward doesn't really like creating physical art, and he said also in the ML interview that he thinks art is the only thing that matters in life. He just continuously wants to create art and continuously one-up himself, and that's why he makes music. That's why he makes anything. He just wants to continue to be a lifelong artist, and you can see this throughout his entire life because he was like 13 years old producing music, and that was the thing that consumed him in life. And he actually had a period of depression after the fact because the only thing that would make him happy is posting a song to SoundCloud and seeing people interact with it. And the only thing that would make him happy is art, and actually became his reason for suffering because he couldn't find happiness in anything else but art. So it was the only place where he could find any joy. So it became the reason he suffered in every other facet of life because he wasn't happy with anything else. All he wanted to do was create art. And you can see that even when he graduated college, he eventually worked in the psychiatric ward and then eventually became a designer. So he always wanted to go back to art and he always wanted to continue to create art because that was the thing that made him tick in life and the thing that actually made him find a lot of joy. Now we go beneath the surface. This is the place for the tweets that you'd only know about if you followed him on Twitter. The first tweet just goes over the Sunny Days in the A lyrics. I'm assuming this is just because there is no lyrics for the I'm a Monster parts of the museum music album, but it is kind of cool to see that Sunny Days in the A is like one of the songs that Edward thinks is the best from the I'm a Monster part because I feel like it really doesn't get the hype it should be getting. I want to present the idea of an off-brand artist. And Edward explained exactly what this meant in the ML interview, where he said he wanted to present something that was iconic and familiar, but at the same time there was something wrong with it, but you couldn't see it at first glance over the image. Like you had to really look into it and be like, oh, that's what's wrong about this image. A good example of this is the photos that Edward used for a lot of his singles in recent times, including like Love You and Useria, where it has such a flat look on the photo that just doesn't seem really right. And also, of course, the museum music cover on his own page, where it's like a CGI generated image of a museum and like a mock-up, and it just seems off, but at the same time it's like I believe they're using like real people in the image, so it's like real people pasted on top of a computer generated image, where it just seems off even though it kind of all looks right when you first look at it. So it's just like something like what AI did in the early days, where it's like you can clearly tell that something's off about the image, but it's kind of hard to find the initial points where you see where it looks off. So I think that's why Edward used AI in its early days, but now AI is kind of spiraled out of control where it's become too good, and now it doesn't really fit the same branding that Edward wants to go for. And then you have this photo of Edward and Brennan, where Edward's taking the photo of Brennan, and it says, first of all, what black man gets their hair cut at Great Clips? And I feel like this one is kind of representative of how Edward kind of shaped Brennan's career, where he didn't do a lot for Brennan, but he did kind of creative direction and kind of told him the right way of doing things. And while Brennan, I think, had a lot of like music integrity, where he was kind of making all the music, Edward kind of shaped Brennan's image around him and kind of showed him what to do and kind of the ropes of everything, where Edward's the guy behind the camera kind of showing Brennan what he is doing, and Brennan's the guy in front of the camera, where that's actually the result of everything that Edward's kind of shaping and creative directing in a way. Then we have the museum music announcement tweet, where this is, I believe, behind the scenes of the Fun music video, and you have Edward and Brennan on a private jet, I believe, And that's pretty interesting that he kind of announced it so far in advance. This is in August, and the album, I believe that same day, he said it was coming out in 2025, and it came out the first day of 2025. Still, that was 5 months later. And I mean, for a lot of people, 5 months is a long time. But for Edward, I mean, clearly January 1st, 2025 was like the least amount of time people had to wait for it. So it's a lot better than if it was like, June 2025. And then we have this photo of Edward getting stabbed by someone, kind of, or in the midst of getting stabbed by someone at a bus stop somewhere, which I don't know. This is just such an interesting one, especially because you have like the Russian text in the background, the Cyrillic, and you also have like Edward kind of looking scared, but he's not looking scared in a way where he's looking scared because he's about to get stabbed by someone. He's looking scared at the camera. He's scared of the camera instead of the person actually about to stab him, which is a really interesting way you can like interpret this photo, because it's not really about the people stabbing him. It's about him getting captured on camera. I'm a Monster by Edward Skeletrix. This is Edward announcing the creation of his side project, I'm a Monster, and I believe this was when the first song also released. And I think it's really interesting. This is the way he announced it, through a Twitter post that didn't even link to the side project on SoundCloud, didn't link to anything. And eventually this is the way that the Museum Music album came out, where half of it came out on his second project and half of it came out on his main page on Spotify. So it's really interesting the way that Edward did everything like this, because this was kind of the announcement of the second Museum Music album, if you think he was planning it out this far in advance. Hey, I need help. Can you text me? This is such an interesting way to start like an artist number, and by putting it out there just on your Twitter saying text me. And Edward also uses his artist number in such a different way from other artists, because he actually responds back to people and he like somewhat interacts with them, and then he'll always post super cryptic texts. Like the texts aren't just normal like, oh, support my music video or whatever. It'll be like always cryptic, and it'll always have like a weird undertone and underfeeling. It all kind of does a good job of like world building, where Edward's even world building in his text to people, and he'll just say random stuff to people to just build this extra world and build this kind of parasocial fandom with people. And it's just a different way of doing things than any other artist. And it's like no other artist would be out there texting people on their phone number except for Edward, and he just is the guy to do that. And then you have this photo of Edward with the Syckli bag next to him, and I believe this one got edited sometimes and it got promoted that way. But I feel like this is one of the first times people had ever seen Edward in a photo. Like honestly, this guy is so secretive and mysterious about himself that this was one of the first times that people like really got a full body shot of him that wasn't edited and just became super weird. So this is just a really interesting photo, and it also has a Syckli bag next to him, which is pretty cool. And then you have this photo with this Amelia Island hat, which eventually became the cover for Junya Junya, but this was released before Junya Junya came out. And I believe his dad got his hat for him. I'm not 100% sure, but Amelia Island did become like a big part of his career at the beginning, because that's kind of what Skeletrix Island evolved out of, because Skeletrix Island was all based on Amelia Island. He just put Skeletrix at the beginning of it. If you can't pay your bills, it's okay. Death isn't bad. You can just die. This is just such a weird tweet to me, but it is referenced in Plastic Body where it says, wanna die, you can't pay your bills. And it is really interesting that he does kind of like preempt a lot of these things so far in advance, where this was almost a year before Plastic Body did come out. But I don't know, this tweet just doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't know what the meaning is. Dinner for tonight. Edward said he posted this as a joke, and it eventually became a huge meme across like Twitter and Instagram. But he said that he does eat like this sometimes because he just gets so hyper focused on some things that he just forgets to eat, and he'll just eat like little snacks like this. But it's just funny because he was just trolling, and this became such a big and huge meme and went so far outside the Edward Skeletrix realm. No matter what happens, it's okay. That's all it means. I show my art to my friends and they say it's ass. I love that. I think this is mainly Edward just saying that whenever you can get strong reactions out of people, whether it's strong positive reactions or strong negative reactions, your art is doing something and it's making people feel something, and that means you've made great art. First of all, you don't even know why you're alive. So how can you tell me what's good and what's bad? this is also another really interesting tweet because you kind of do know why you're alive because your parents made you, but at the same time, I do understand what he's saying where it's like, we weren't put on the earth for any specific reason. We're just here and we're just doing whatever we want. So how can you tell me the reason something is good or something's bad? Because you just have your own opinion on it. So you can't tell me if something's good or something's bad. Similar to that early tweet where it's like, there's no such thing as good or bad people. It's all just subjective. Stop all of this celebrity worship. I think this just shows that Edward kind of never wanted to be a celebrity. He never wanted to be a huge artist, and he thinks that people worshiping celebrities in a way, treating them like they're gods, is really just not a human thing that we should be doing. We shouldn't see people as amazing and different than us because they're all just humans at the end of the day. This dude Stolen is the GOAT. I don't really know who Stolen is, so I don't really know the context behind this, but I'm assuming it's like some producer that he's saying is the GOAT. We live in a sick-ass world. This to me really relates to Edward's world building, where I feel like all of his tweets, they kind of remind me of someone that has a pessimistic view on life, and maybe Edward actually holds this view, or maybe this is just a part of his character, Edward Skeletrix, but I think this is really just reminiscing of that, where it's like Edward sees everyone thinking of the worst possible things. He sees people as manipulators, as cheaters, as backstabbers, but that's not really how life is. But there are so many things that are happening that are sick and just terrible things to happen to people, and that's what he sees out of the world. It's his worldview, and his worldview as Edward Skeletrix has always been extremely pessimistic. 2020, I was like, do I myself or what? And I think at this time period, Edward was graduating college, and it seems like it was a tough time period to go through, especially while he was graduating college and wasn't able to do that because of COVID. So it kind of sucks for him, and I think he was going through some even deeper and darker things like depersonalization and depression. So it seems like he had a lot of tough times during 2020, but the fact that he made a tweet about that and kind of like revealed some lore there, but also at the same time like said, oh, I was going through some dark times at this moment, it kind of shows that he's gotten over that and now is on to bigger things, and he's kind of like, wow, that time period was so dark and now I'm in a much better place. You can't find true love trying to be someone else. I think this is one of the most true things that Edward has said on Twitter, because you really can't find true love unless you are being yourself. I think he's saying true love has to be something where someone accepts you for all that you are and loves you for that, and you accept them for the same thing. And you can't do that trying to be someone else, because someone will be accepting you for something that you aren't truly are, and you're putting on a mask, you're putting on a character to be something that they want to love, instead of just allowing yourself to be yourself, and just they'll love you for that. I think that's something that everyone should learn. You just have to be yourself, and people will like you for who you are instead of liking you for something that you put on and a character that you put on. Because when you are pretending to be someone else, people will never love you for yourself, and you'll always have to be someone else to fit what they think you are. Now we move into the Twilight Zone. This is the tweets you'd only know about if you were a super big Edward fan and followed all of his tweets. Why does house music emphasize the music at the end? I want to buy a beat from you. Can you DM me? This one is really weird because I don't think Edward ever bought the beat from this guy, so I don't really understand what happened here. And the fact that Edward kind of broke character in a sense to make a tweet that was kind of outside of his normal tweeting ability, where he's just always tweeting his thoughts out, and this one was more of like a business agreement, is pretty interesting. And yeah, just the fact that it never got used and it never amounted to anything is also just weird that he keeps it up. It's art in living. I think this one is also a great tweet from Edward, because there really is something artistic about living, because almost any moment you live in your own life could be turned into some form of music, some form of artistic expression. And almost everything you do in life is a form of artistic expression, expressing your feelings and your emotions. And that's kind of what art is. It's capturing your life and turning them into something that can kind of live forever and surpass you, and capturing those emotions. So it is really interesting that Edward put this out, and I'm assuming this also means that he gets a lot of his inspiration from just living, and that's where the most inspiration comes from just living and taking in new emotions and new feelings. I got catfished on Instagram. Edward explained that this tweet was him actually getting catfished on Instagram. He didn't get catfished at this time, but it did kind of add to this character of he's just a human being like the rest of us, and he could get catfished just like any of us could. I'm getting old. It's time for me to grow up and stop having emotions. This also is very relevant to the Eckhart Tolle school of teachings, where Eckhart Tolle says you kind of have to just give up all your emotions and just focus on the present and stop thinking about things that kind of bother you. I think this is really reminiscent of that. Well, it's kind of more about, oh, once you're old, you have to like be a working person and stop having emotions and stop thinking about things and just put in your life and clock into the 9 to 5 for the rest of your life. It's very reminiscent of that, but at the same time, it really fits Edward's philosophy of like giving up on all the things around you and just focusing on what you can change and stop letting emotions control you. And next you have this photo of Edward flicked up with the Anthony riddle on. I don't really know what this one means at all because the quote tweet that he was quoting isn't there anymore, but it is kind of a cool photo, and I actually do like the drip even though it looks like he's wearing a garbage bag and an orange backpack. Why watch a horror movie when you can open your eyes? And I feel like this is very similar to the thing earlier where Edward's always seen life as a pessimistic thing, and he thinks that a horror movie is really in real life when clearly it isn't. But I understand the meaning of this tweet because it's mainly about saying that if you really open your eyes and look at real life, horrible things are happening every single day and you really can't avoid them. But if you do just focus on those things, it's going to make your life an actual horror movie. Hey, I really need you to text me right now. It's an emergency. Please help me. And then he puts his number after that. This is a really interesting way that Edward promotes his number. I think coupled with some of the other tweets where he's also promoting his number, he's making it seem like there is something urgent that people need to text him for. And he's using it as a way to make these kind of like rage bait tweets where people actually are like, oh my God, there's actually an emergency that Edward needs and they need to text him. And then he gets all these people to start texting him. But I do think it is weird because he's like using it in a weird way to use these situations that could actually potentially be serious, like an emergency, to promote his number. But I do think it is all part of this character and all part of this world building that Edward's trying to do with it. I just be saying shit because it sounds tough. Nothing I say really has any meaning. This is similar to a lot of other rap artists where I feel like they just say stuff to rage bait people, especially someone like Nine Vicious right now, where he just kind of says and disses people just because he's like, oh my God, this is going to get me a lot of clicks and likes. And I feel like this is really just hitting at those people that just say stuff to sound like, oh my God, I just be sounding cool. I shoot people, I kill people, I do all this crazy shit. And it's like a lot of these other artists, they just say stuff because it makes them look cool in the eyes of the general public. And I feel like Edward's saying the same thing where he's like, a lot of my character is just made so I can look cool online, and it's all a part of this master plan of marketing myself and branding myself as this insane artist. Skeletrix Island Radio 667. This is another tweet that kind of announces Skeletrix Island, and I think this is the first one that announces the 667 at the end of it, which is really interesting that he changed it like 3 months after he announced the album. And I think this is all part of like the Laylo. I think he got 667 from the Laylo. I'm not 100% sure, but it's also funny because I feel like his number has been tainted by the 67 meme for a good amount of time now, and I think it's just kind of turning into a meme itself because 667 has 67 in it. And then we have this photo of this Thanksgiving turkey that's black and just looks absolutely disgusting. I feel like this is very similar to what Edward said earlier with the off-brand artist, where he always wanted to create something that felt similar and felt familiar, yet also felt off. And I feel like this Thanksgiving turkey does exactly that. People will watch the Jeffrey Dahmer show but get offended at life. I've always taken this tweet as a reflection of the absurdity of modern media culture, where we'll have people shooting and murdering each other. I think very similarly, the modern music culture, where a lot of the lyrics are about murdering people and just hurting people, and everyone just dancing to them and making it seem so upbeat. And there's such a weird media culture of like allowing violence in certain areas and then condoning it in real life. And I understand media is a lot different from real life. Like, of course, hurting someone in real life is different from hurting someone in media because there is no actual effects in media. But the fact that we have so much violence in all these areas of life and only condone it when it happens in real life and don't condone it at all in media is kind of a weird conundrum. If you think about it, we not really living for none. And This is also very true from Edward. There's no reason we were put on planet Earth. We're always just someone that evolved, and we're not living for anything. You get to make your own destiny, and you aren't put in a very specific way to do something. You're not a cog in the machine. You have the ability to shape your own future. It kind of scares me how easy it is to create a narrative. I could create a narrative about anything right now, and as long as I put in minimal effort and make people emotional, the masses will believe it. This is very similar to all the music marketing right now, where the whole point of music is to market something that has a specific narrative to it. Every artist wants to be perceived in a certain way, and Edward does the same thing here, where he realizes that marketing, all it is about making people emotional and making them want to feel something that might not be there, but they want to feel and believe that it's real. Someone like Hollis right now is someone that's kind of leaning into the marketing of like, oh, I'm someone that's a boyfriend, leaning into the parasocial fandom that he has of all these K-pop girls. And everyone wants to believe that their artist is someone that actually cares about them and understands them and feels the exact pain that they feel or the exact emotions that they feel. And an artist, all you need to do is make someone emotional and make someone feel like they have some kind of connection to you, and almost anyone will believe and understand and treat you like a god if you do that, because you made them emotional and you made them have their own connection to you. It logically doesn't make sense to care about anything. This to me is another mistweet by Edward, because it does make sense to care about things because you have to care about things to make life enjoyable, but it is kind of a reference to the Eckhart Tolle philosophy of just kind of giving up on the things that you can control and giving up on the things that you might have an overall connection to, where if you have a connection that really like hurts the rest of your life and you give up on that, it might make yourself freer and it might make you able to do things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. So if you kind of give up on everything, you can make it a lot easier to achieve the things that you actually do want to do. So I think that's kind of what he's saying here. It's like, give up on connections that aren't helping you, but I do think you have to care about something, and I do logically think it makes sense to care about things instead of just giving up on caring about anything. My existence is for fun. I feel like there's not really that much you can glean from this, but just the fact is you're put on this earth to do whatever you want, and you need to maximize that for your own fun instead of prioritizing someone else. No matter how many problems you solve, your brain is always going to tell you there are more problems. When you accept the problems, they go away. This is extremely true because there always are going to be more problems. Life is extremely chaotic. Everything is always going to change. There's always going to be more problems that come up. So if you accept that there are going to be problems, and if you accept that you can't try and fix every single problem that comes up, it'll become so much easier to eventually fix those problems when they do come up, and just understand that problems are going to happen in life and chaotic things are going to happen. So you just have to solve them when they do come up, and you don't have to solve them before they actually happen. There is no need to change yourself to connect with other people. You will naturally attract and repel who's not supposed to be in your life just by being an individual and knowing you don't need anyone. Edward really cooked on this tweet because I feel like there really is no reason to ever change yourself, because just by being an individual and being a person, you're going to naturally have people that like you and people that probably don't like you. And if you put on a mask and you try and change yourself to be someone else, it'll be so much less fun because you're not going to be yourself, and people are going to like you for who you are. They're going to like you for this mask that you put on and this person that you're trying to be when you're not actually that person in real life. And if you just stay yourself and you naturally are a good person and you naturally just be yourself, you're going to attract people that think you're a cool person and like you for actually who you are. So you don't have to put on this mask to attract people, because there are always going to be people that like you and there are always going to be people that dislike you. And if you try to put on a mask to fit in with the people that maybe don't like you as much as people that would like you, you're always going to be this person that doesn't feel true to themselves. The person that says I love you will turn on you if the conditions are right. It's okay though, that's just the nature of being a human. I really like this statement from Edward because there really is no reason that someone that says I love you one day needs to stick by you the rest of your life because of this, and there'll always be perfect conditions where someone will leave you even if they do love you. I think it's a lot harder if you're like a parent has an obligation to like save you in a certain way, because that's just the nature of being human, where you're always going to want to care for your kids. But even parents in the right situation will leave you and find a different thing, because some parents really just don't care about people, even though the majority probably do and do have a loving of you. But if you have a partner they might turn on you if the situation and if the conditions are right. So you realize that people don't have to continuously love you, even if they do say love you, because humans are inherently selfish and they're always going to prioritize themselves over someone else. And that's what you have to realize, that people are always going to have to prioritize themselves. So if you're not putting in the effort, that person may turn on you. It's hard to be a good person. This is extremely true because there is no definition of good or bad person, like Edward said earlier. And it's always going to be hard to be a good person because you can be a good person to someone and another person might think you're a bad person. I hate that I have to feel physical attraction. Physical attraction is something that is so interesting to me because it's a liking of someone without having any actual perspective on them. You don't like the person for how they are, you like the person just because of how they look, and it changes how you perceive them in so many other ways. So it's so interesting how much physical attraction and just the look of someone can affect all your other feelings about that person. Fuck with that dude Elon Musk. This one aged extremely poorly after what Elon did, but Edward also referenced Elon in a song on Skeletrix Language. I believe it was like typical rap song 6 or 7. Sometimes you gotta ask yourself what's wrong. The answer is always nothing. I think Edward said this because he doesn't want people to just wallow in their negative feelings. There's no reason to just keep up these negative feelings if there is something more positive to do. But I don't think you should always say there's nothing wrong when there's something that might be wrong, because someone could help you through that. But I think allowing yourself to just wallow in negative feelings is always going to be something negative to do. And you kind of have to force yourself to do something and allow yourself to do something positive to kind of get out of some of those negative feelings. Now we go into the midnight zone. This is the place for the less well-known tweets on Edward's Twitter, the ones you have to find if you're just a super fan, you're scouring through his Twitter. Only give 100% effort when they deserve it. This is extremely true. People are always going to give less effort to you, and you only need to give 100% effort to people who are also going to reciprocate that back to you and also going to put in effort to help your life. You can't put in 100% effort to people who are only giving you 50% back, because they're not going to help you. You need to put 100% effort into people who are going to multiply that effort and turn it into something where the output is 150%. Everyone's a celebrity in 2024. Social media has made everyone being a celebrity so much easier to do, where you don't have to bring any actual value to society. You don't have to be a musician, an artist. You can just be a social media influencer and be known for exclusively your personality, and you can be a celebrity, which is crazy. And in 2024, I feel like this is really where it kind of started, where you just had this wide variety of people that brought no actual value to society, and they're all celebrities and they're all people that we consume so much content of. Always trying to be something, but you already are everything. People always try and change their life and change what they seem and act and feel like to make themselves look cooler, maybe online, maybe to just other people. And the thing is, oftentimes the more unique you are, the cooler you actually are, because you don't care about what other people say. You don't care about what other people think, because you just are yourself and you are so unique. And I feel like Edward really takes this to an extreme, where he is such a unique character, and everything that he says and does seems truly like Edward Skeletrix or Edward King Bass IV. So you just have to be everything you are, and it'll make yourself so much cooler. It'll make yourself so much more unique, and people will start to revolve around you instead of you revolving around other people. If you get mad, you lose. This is mainly a reference to rage bait, I'm assuming, where if you do get mad, you're the one who loses. The other person gets attention, and you are giving your attention to someone else. The more you allow yourself to give attention to other people who are there to bait you, the more likely you are to just lose in life, because you're investing energy into someone who doesn't care at all about you and is using you to make their engagement stats look better. On my own again, on my own again. This is a very lonely tweet from Edward, where he seems so sad that he's on his own again. And you can achieve a lot of things while you are on your own, but of course you need to be with a group of people to achieve the things you really want to do. I always get what I want, but it's never enough. This is representative of humans at all levels of wealth, where even the richest people on earth, like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, they always want more money. They always get what they want, but it's never enough, because there's never a satisfaction in life where you can reach a number and you're like, oh, I'm satisfied. There's always the human push to continue to get more. And someone like Edward, he's been very successful in life, but you always want to achieve more and do more, because there's just the human drive to just continue to achieve more and more things. It's very interesting to me. We're in this fantasy land where no one knows how we got here, no matter how much they claim to know. And people act like you really have full control over your life and what happens to you. This one is really interesting to me because Edward says where no one knows how we got here. And it is true that because humans only live 50 to 100 years on average, there is no way to know what has happened before. And even if we can act like we're archaeologists or paleontologists or scientists and say, oh, we can predict all these things that happened in the past based on evolution and history, there's no way to actually understand how we got here. And even though you can come up with an educated guess, there's no reason you can actually say 100% true, this is how we got onto Earth, this is how we got here. And there is this kind of act where Edward says there's no control over your actual life. Everyone's kind of put in this preset path, which I don't fully agree with, but I get what he's saying here, where it's like, we don't know how we got here, so if there was a God, would they not be controlling our lives and controlling everything we do, even if all these people say there's all these other explanations that could explain why we got here? I know nobody loves me, they just like what I create and my personality. But you don't need love in your life, so it's okay. When you do become a musician, especially at Edward's size, you have all these people that are raving about you, and they love you for all these reasons, and he's saying that fans don't actually love him, they just love this character and this personality he created, and there isn't this true love because there's no emotional connection between Edward and them. They just have this emotional connection to this character that he created and the emotions that he references when he makes music and these emotions that he captures in his music. So it's like people have this parasocial relationship where they have fallen in love with this character of who Edward is, but if they met him in real life, he might not live up to the same character because people don't actually love him as a person. They love this character and this personality that he's created from his music. Life is a joke no matter how serious they try to make it. Even if life does get you down by being super serious and being super impactful to you, you just have to treat life as a joke because there's no way you're going to be able to enjoy life if you take everything so seriously. You have to be able to just let go of something sometimes and just take it as a joke because there's always going to be better things in life and there's always going to be things that are going to make you feel bad, but you just have to take it in stride and take it as a joke and take it as something that you don't take seriously because it's not going to affect you in the long term. Your true self has nothing to do with your personality. Your personality is just a reflection of your true self, and it's a way that you kind of snip off the bad things that are reliant in your true self and turn them into something that may be a little bit more palatable for other people. It's kind of like turning your true self into a sort of branding where it's like your personality is just a reflection of your true self in a way that it's kind of the brand that your true self gives off to other people. Do what you want, that's the only rule in life. If you allow yourself to be controlled by other people and do what they want, you're always going to become a slave to them in a sense. If you just do exactly what you want and you do what's best for you and best for the people around you, you're always going to be so much more fulfilled by your life because you're not going to be turned into someone that just does something for someone else. You can't let yourself be controlled by other people. You just have to allow yourself to do what you want, but don't hurt other people in that way. You need to just slowly build yourself up day by day and do what you want and turn it into a long-term goal. When you have peace in your own mind, there is world peace. Your own mind is the only kind of peace you can control. You can't control what other people think. You can't control what other people feel. You can only control yourself. So the only way to achieve world peace, in a sense, is to control your own thoughts and your own feelings. So if you have peace in your own mind, it's going to be so much easier to feel this kind of world peace. If you allow yourself to be controlled by what other people are saying and the feelings around the rest of the world, it's going to be so much harder to find peace in your own mind. I hate how drastically my emotions fluctuate. I'm assuming this is when Edward started to read Eckhart Tolle and get into that sphere of mind because it seemed like after this fact he kind of gave up on allowing his emotions to control himself, and he just kind of gave up on having any sort of emotions because they were controlling his life too much by fluctuating so often. Imagine the Arca version of Kanye. This is a really interesting tweet because Arca and Edward actually follow each other on Instagram, so maybe we could see an Arca and Edward collab soon, but just so funny that Edward's kind of tweeting about Arca and Kanye because I feel like they have a lot of influence on the music he makes now. People aren't going to understand for a while. This is a crazy tweet to see because this happened in June 2023, 6 months before Skeletrix Language came out, and over a year and a half before Museum Music came out. And I feel like even now, people are finally starting to come around to Edward's music. He still has that cult fan base that like really understands exactly what he's doing and kind of his whole gist as an artist. But I feel like even now, almost 2 years since this tweet has come out, over 2 years since this tweet has come out, people still are just starting to come around on Edward. And it's like he predicted exactly what would happen with his music over 2 years ago. And yeah, finally now people are starting to come around to Edward Skeletrix's music. Life is a crazy joke. This one is also crazy to me because this happened in March 15th, 2023, over 2 years ago and almost 2 years before Museum Music came out. And this was exactly the reasoning of Museum Music and kind of the through line between the entire album and its lyrics and its musical content. So it's just crazy that Edward kind of predicted his entire album cycle over 2 years before it even came out. And now we move to the abyss, the tweets that almost no Edward Skeletrix fans know unless they've just looked through every single thing that Edward has ever posted. I designed this shirt in 2005 with my signature. Atlanta Bright Family Reunion 2005, $15,000. This is one of the first things that Edward has ever designed, and I'm assuming it probably was the first thing he ever designed in his entire life. And the fact that he was trying to sell this for $15,000 is crazy. And you have the Edward King Bass signature at the very bottom. I don't know, this thing could actually go for $15,000 right now. And especially if Edward does become a great artist in the future that has a long legacy, I feel like this shirt could easily go for like $100,000 if it stayed in good condition to the right collector. And then we have a tweet where Edward attaches some screenshots of a conversation with his dad, and his dad is just saying all these things about believing in God and all these crazy things that he believes in, like Amun-Ra. I don't know why Amun-Ra has something to do with the Christian God because he's an Egyptian god, but it's so interesting that his dad is all on this crazy mysticism thing when I feel like Edward is someone that's the most pragmatic person and all he cares about is like the things that are happening right now to him and how he affects his actual like mental being. He doesn't really care about like God or mysticism in that way. It's all about what affects his actual daily life and his career in that way. If you have an opinion, you are mentally ill. This is such an interesting tweet coming from Edward because I feel like this doesn't really line up with his other things. He's all talking about how like emotions control people. And I think this is kind of what he's saying here, where if you have a specific opinion that's affecting your emotions, you're allowing it to mentally control you and like affect you in that way. I think that's kind of what he's saying. And a lot of the people that have the strongest opinions in today's world often chain themselves to those opinions in such a strong way that it doesn't allow themselves to ever change, where they're like, oh, you have to agree with a specific opinion or you're a terrible person. I think that's such a weird way to look at life, where a lot of people just don't understand your perspective and where you're coming from, and you have to attack them in a way where they can understand your perspective on the opinion. And the fact that a lot of people just have chained themselves to thinking that an opinion is a fact and not a thing that can be changed by different people is such a weird thing in today's society. The key is to not care, but that's just so hard, isn't it? Yes, this is one of Edward's best tweets, and I feel like in general, the key of not caring, or like the person who cares the least has the most power in every situation, is just such an impactful thought because it just kind of changes your perspective on things. Because if you just stop caring about things, you stop caring about really the actual interaction, you stop overthinking the future, it's going to make yourself so much more free. But that is such a hard thing to do because you want to have the perfect life. You want to have everything go the exact right way, and to give up caring about any situation in any moment is so hard to do. So it's like to allow yourself to get to that level is so hard to do, but when you do eventually find that, it'll become so much freer to just not care about things and not care about micromanaging every single detail. There will never be world peace, and there doesn't need to be. This is also extremely true by Edward because humans are inherently selfish, and I don't think even if someone controlled the entire world, there would ever be world peace. People are always going to want things better than they used to be, and until we get to a point where we can always continuously make things better for the rest of our life for every single person on earth, people will always want more for themselves. They'll never be satisfied with exactly what they have. They'll always want more. And until we can continuously allow for everyone's singular needs to be fulfilled at every single moment in their life, that's not going to happen. People are always going to be fighting over things. They're always going to be wanting more than they actually have. And that will always continue to create this distinction and tension between war and people. And people will always throw away other people's lives for what they want. Emotions aren't real, and it's sad. And that's not technically true, but I feel like emotions are seen as these overarching and much bigger things than they actually are. They're all just a chemical interaction inside your body, making you feel a specific way. And I feel like people allow themselves to be controlled by their emotions too much. Some people allow their music taste to control their emotions, where they only listen to sad music and it makes them a lot sadder. And I think people in general need to stop just letting their emotions control them, because there's so much more of a life you can live out there if you just allow your emotions to just be secondary to your actual nature. My dad is a doctor and a schizo. Edward really opens up about his life in some of these tweets where he talks about his family, and he shared the screenshot of his dad and like all the stuff he's talking about. But it is a really interesting dichotomy in the world where some of the people that are like the most successful are actually like the weirdest people possible, and they're narcissists and they're schizophrenic and they think about all these weird things, and they somehow get into these super successful places, like they're doctors and they're like cutting people's hearts up and they're doing these things and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and actually they're just really weird people and they're narcissistic and they think in a certain way. It's just crazy how some of these people become the most successful people in the entire world by having these such weird personalities and weird personality quirks. Nothing is separate. Me, you, and the bed I'm laying on are all the same thing. Thoughts try to say otherwise. Thoughts are the only things that differentiate one person from another. Someone having a brain is the only thing that makes them a different person from someone else. And the thing is, no other animal except for humans can come up with thoughts like this. So the fact that a human can kind of realize that they're all separate beings and every single person has a brain and they're all coming up with separate thoughts is the only way that we come up with things that kind of differentiate us from each other, because everyone really is one separate good. We're all part of Earth, and everyone in a sense is all part of the same like ecosystem where we're all like breathing into each other's bodies, and the molecules between us are all shared between everyone. The water that goes into our body is then recycled by Earth. We're all part of Earth, but at the same time we're all separate because of our own thoughts and our own brains, because in a way we have our own Earth in our own head, and we're all part of this one Earth, but we have our own world inside of our own head. The only way to reach your dream is to give up on it. I think what Edward's trying to say here is that if you just think about your dream all the time and you have this huge dream of like, oh, I want to be a famous artist and I want to drop a platinum album. It's like, if you think about that and that's your only dream and that's all you're working towards, it's a lot harder to get to that dream versus if you just give up on that and you try a lot smaller things where it's like, oh, I just want to be a recording artist. I just want to make music. I just want to have fun. And if you do that, it's going to be a lot easier to achieve that goal by making a lot smaller steps instead of having this huge dream and goal that you're working to achieve your entire life. If you just break your dream into a bunch of smaller things and you give up on it and you just try to do things that eventually will lead you to the dream and the goal that you're trying to work towards, it'll be a lot easier to do that. I'm making a movie without making a film. This is the last tweet in this entire Iceberg, and I feel like this one really represents the entirety of Edward's career. He's always been working towards this. He's always been making a movie / I think world building is really the key term here. He's always been building a world and building a character that people can relate to and people can connect with. And I feel like this tweet really exemplifies that he's been thinking about this even from over 2 years ago when he first tweeted this out and like beginning his musical career. He's always been working towards doing this like world building thing instead of making music. He's never been about just the music. He's always been about making this kind of like visual artist style and also just this whole style that people can get engrossed into and make this world that people can really fall in love with and feel like they're a part of when they become a fan of his. So I think it's just crazy that Edward has always kind of thought in this way, and he's eventually built something that has become this world that people have fallen in love with. And that wraps up this video. Thank you guys for putting so much love into these Edward videos, and I'm going to be making a lot more about a lot different artists really soon.